welcome back to another episode of Between the Pages. Today we're going to do another comics to film, but because we're discussing Lois Lane, who's in the big Man of Steel movie this summer, I thought I'd bring in a fellow female reader, because Lois is such a popular character with female readers, Sam Cross from Word of the Nerd Online, and you've also seen her before she came on to discuss Cyclops with me, Evil Cyclops. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Grace.
So are you too a Lois Lane fan?
I am, yes. I haven't always been reading the Superman comics, but I've always been aware of Lois. I've always been a fan of hers whenever she comes up in specific storylines and in the movies and everything, so I'm a Lois fan.
Like you, I haven't been a big Lois reader because I don't like the way she's been treated ever since she married Superman. I don't like the way she's being treated in the New 52, but I loved Teri Hatcher on Lois and Clark, right? I thought she was like the perfect Lois. And I also really liked Delany on The Adventures of Superman. So media has really influenced my impression of Lois. And I also like Margot Kidder. But we're going to start talking about the comics, all right? So how important do you think Lois is to the Superman mythos? Because there's people go back and forth on this.
I think Lois is tremendously important. I mean, just as much as Lex Luthor is the ultimate villain for Clark, Kal-El, Superman, however you want to call it.
A lot of people don't agree about that either. You and I are on the same page as Superman.
I love Lex. Lex is my ultimate favorite villain. But Lois is equally as important to the Superman mythos because it's that age-old farm boy, city girl. Romance kind of reminiscent of the 30s when she was created, and she keeps him grounded more than anyone else. I mean, other than his parents who gave him the philosophy from which he kind of bases everything. Lois, I think, provides that grown-up adult counterbalance to his alienness and everything.
That's an excellent point because everyone always talks about Superman's like a god, but I think no one can cut someone down like Lois Lane, right? So I think that's really an important quality, and she was around from the first issue. I mean, Lois Lane was in issue number 1 of Superman, of Action Comics. She was there from the beginning. Well, we're going to go through the timeline in a minute for the character, but I also think that Lois has had her own series more than any other supporting girlfriend. Even though her comic was called Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane, just in case you needed to validate why you were picking it up.
All those madcap adventures she went on.
She was waiting for him. She had to do something. But but I mean, a character with no superpowers, no less, to anchor her own comic. I think they had Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane for a while, a couple years ago, but it never was the level of Lois Lane. I mean, Lois's comic, that Superman's Girlfriend one, ran for over 10, 15, I think 130-something issues.
Something like that, yeah.
Which is really impressive.
It's that idea that Lois, she was around before Wonder Woman, so she is that female character who has no superpowers and is a go-getter. She goes out there, she's like, I'm going to get the story, I'm going to do this, I can take care of myself, even though there's that whole, we're just waiting for Superman to rescue Lois bit.
Well, not when she started out. That's what's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So she starts out, as you said, 1930s, 1940s, and it very much has a His Girl Friday kind of vibe.
I know that she's based on kind of a 19th century reporter named Nellie Bly, who purposely checked herself into a mental institution just to figure out how they were being treated there.
Wow, yeah. So it's great to see when female journalists were starting to come up and really do well. The creators of Superman based that on that, and she's also based, I believe, on a popular serial of movies as well, right?
Yeah.
So you have, and there's a lot of female reporters. I mean, it's a staple of the screwball comedy. But then I thought it was interesting that I like her military background, which didn't come into play until the modern age. But she starts out when they do this thing where they're like, Lois also grew up on a farm in a place called Pittsdale. Yeah. And as a Pittsburgh, with family in Pittsburgh, I'm offended by that.
It kind of takes away from the whole, again, the city girl and the country boy aspect of it. If she grows up on a farm, they're like, well, it takes away from her kind of, I guess, urban attitude.
I think your counterbalance argument is perfect, and that's the way she was set up. And also, when they have this thing, they have Lois was a kid reporter, and she wins a contest and goes to the Daily Planet, and she meets Clark as a kid and Superboy as a kid, and I hate that. I don't like when they mix them up as kids.
It takes away from the actual purpose of their meeting, the whole idea of Superman and Lois and Clark and Lois is that he's supposed to show up in Metropolis and meet this woman who kind of is just almost rattles his cage, a lot more than anyone else ever has. And it's not small town romance, it's big city romance, and I think that's what intrigues Clark about Lois is that, like you said, no one cuts him down more than her. She's always challenging him and getting into situations that can frustrate him. Like, why don't you just let me take care of it? She's like, why would I do that?
Yeah, and exactly. I think to some degree, Clark went to the big city for a reason to be a reporter. I think, of course, because he wanted to have an excuse to follow the news. But I think also, that's something that interested him. So in some ways, I feel Lois is like his dream girl. It's who he hoped he would meet in the big city.
Yeah.
Because I like that farm boy in the big city vibe. I mean, we're having a lot of discussions about that here on Think About Think and Beyond the Trailer, and the people don't like that. But I like it, and I'm glad you do too. Okay. But so they have that evolution, and Lana Lang comes into the picture too. She finally gets a romantic rival. What do you think of Lana?
I mean, all I know really of Lana is from Smallville, and
yeah, a lot of people like the Kristen Crook's Lana Lang. I know her from Superman for All Seasons, and also from occasionally she's in the comics a little bit. And they gave her like an interesting remake in the animated series where she became like a big fashion designer, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
But to me, like Lana's definitely the Betty Cooper of this relationship, right? Exactly. And she always gets left behind. I mean, I don't think she's ever really a rival for Lois.
It's like she's just kind of presented as like, oh, maybe Clark likes her a little more than Lois, and Lois gets jealous, and whoops, he always loved Lois the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. She's more just like, she was introduced as an ex, and I think she's always treated as an ex.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, every time you see Lana, you're like, count down till her heart gets broken.
Exactly. It's the same with Lois, like, if they introduce a new love interest for her, anything. It's always kind of we know it's gonna, her and Clark forever. And I think that's the way people are starting to look at the New 52 as well.
Oh, totally.
That it's kind of like a countdown again to when are Lois and Clark gonna get together, because we know it's gonna happen.
Oh, totally. So, but the interesting thing is back to the timeline with the comics. In the 1950s, Superman becomes like really sci-fi because they're like, oh, a lot of boys are reading this. So Lois, they take away the whole journalism angle for everybody because Superman's fighting like aliens and sci-fi stuff and monsters.
Like you do.
Right? Yeah. So Lois just becomes like this damsel in distress, and then also I find a very weird hobby trying to marry Superman.
Yeah, it's that weird mentality of, I think it's probably in the same vein as when Wortham showed up, and it's the whole like, girls should be doing this and not be doing that, or else it's obviously code for something else.
Yeah.
And
no, you take this reporter, and she just becomes like, how am I going to get Superman to marry me? And like she succeeds, but then it always is like, oh, got you, Lois, it's a robot. It's just so embarrassing. I hate when that happens.
Don't you hate it when you marry a robot that you think is Superman? Oh, sucks for everybody.
But I have to say, I've never liked Lois more than in the 70s when they kind of updated her. They did the same thing with Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman put on that mod outfit, and I think she looked better too. But I love the Lois. Like, my mom is the only comic book my mother ever picked up. Like there was like a DC superhero comic or a Marvel comic was Lois Lane.
Really?
Yes. So Lois Lane always has a special place in my heart for that reason as well. And it bothers me there's no Lois Lane comic today, but we're hopping around here. But I feel like that comic did work. And I got from my mom for her birthday a few years ago. I found like this great set of like Lois Lane like sayings from covers of like, don't keep me waiting, Superman. It was like
cool.
That's my favorite Lois. Like the sexy Lois, but she's like, but still a professional. Lois. Because I feel sometimes they dress her down a little bit, or they make her too sexy. I've seen Lois wearing some very low cut shirts recently.
Yeah, more so than a journalist should really be wearing.
I'm like, whoa, Lois. Zip up.
And I think that's the brilliance of Lois Lane, is that because she is a reporter, she can change with the times more so than any other character can. I mean,
that's a great point.
The look of Superman is always going to be this iconic look, but Lois is the character that you can be like, well, she's wearing what's popular for the time period, or she can be the timeless aspect of his comic books, because you look at Lois and you're like, oh, it's the 60s. Oh, it's the 70s.
I love it. That's true. You just look to Superman's right.
Yeah.
Like, okay. That's true. I mean, that's interesting. I think that I really like that a lot. I think Lois, and I think they've stopped doing that, which is part of the problem with the character. But then in the 70s, but then Superman's girlfriend gets canceled, but they go into the modern age with John Byrne, and he really redefines Lois.
Because her military background with her father, Sam Lane, I think that adds another level to her because he gives her the army brat background so that she's a bit more savvy about how the government works, about having kind of also ins to stories that she can get a hold of because like, oh, my dad's a general, I can just call in whoever and I'll get the scoop or whatever.
And also it makes her not such a damsel in distress. Like she knows how to use some firearms, she has some training in martial arts. And also why she wouldn't be afraid. And being an army brat, I mean, that's a certain type of personality. And Lois isn't someone who's very social. I mean, she's not a character who has although it's interesting, no girlfriends in comics really have like their own social life.
Yeah, it's like there's Lois, and what does she do when Clark isn't around? You know? I don't know.
Closet.
I always feel like
matching closets. I don't understand why I don't have Lois doesn't have a best friend, which is a little weird. But so you have that situation, and so I like the update quite a bit. I think it's fantastic. I much prefer this one. And so the character goes along, and then they want them to get married.
Yeah.
But then they're like, oh, we have this big television show coming up, Lois and Clark, and they're not going to be married on the show. So what are we going to do? I think we should kill Superman.
That seems like the logical choice to make.
That's like the craziest way to get out of a wedding ever. He's just like, wow, I got in cold feet. I think I'm gonna go fight Doomsday. He didn't have to fight him.
I got an appointment with Doomsday.
Yeah.
I will meet you at the altar.
Yeah, exactly. She's like that. It's like right with Captain America and Peggy Carter.
Yeah.
You're like, oh
every time, Clark. Every time.
I know. So I mean, but that's a great storyline. I love the way that was really well done in the Death of Superman that she was covering that fight.
Yeah, and it gives her that emotional resonance too because I mean at that point she knew he was both Clark and Superman at that point. So it gives her those emotional stakes where she's basically watching the man she loves getting pummeled to death, before her very eyes. And then her journalistic integrity, is just like, I have to report this.
And I can't tell a secret.
Exactly. And she can't mourn both of them. She's only mourning one of them, basically.
Well, that's what's interesting. When, Superman dies, everyone's like, maybe, I believe it's like Clark might have been caught in the blowback, in the rubble and killed. There's that mystery of like, what happened. But then Superman, of course, comes back. And Lois and Clark is a big hit on television. So they decide to do, like, weddings at the same time. Yay! I'm glad she got him, okay? And the relationship has to progress. But I think marrying Superman was probably the worst thing to ever happen to the character of Lois Lane.
I think it can go both ways. In terms of the progression of the relationship, it was like either they're gonna get married eventually or they're gonna have to just dissolve the relationship entirely.
Yeah.
Because
and Clark's not the kind of guy to just date someone and like live together. Let's move in together.
Yeah, exactly.
He's from Kansas. They are gonna get married.
Exactly. And they'd been together for so long at that point. You're just like, you have to make a decision either way. So them getting married is a mixed blessing. I feel because on the one hand, yes, the relationship progresses, but then again, Lois is kind of relegated to that. Now she's just Superman's wife or Clark Kent's wife. And I think different books have tried to still make her a relevant character in his life in terms of just keeping her like that force that's, oh, you're going to go off and fight aliens. Well, I have to go and report in Bialya about this thing that's going on. So have fun.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they had that whole thing where like Lois got shot. They tried to do some stuff like that. I remember that. I remember the cover. And I was like, finally, great story for Lois. And then I read it and I was like, not a great story for Lois. And I just feel like they really dropped the reporter angle for her. I mean, she's always at the Daily Planet. But as you said, she's not going off to cover things. She doesn't really have her own life anymore. She really is just like, all right, now that we're married, I'm going to constantly cover for you. And also, I have to say, they changed the character's hair to like a reddish brown. And I don't, it's not Lois to me.
Yeah, it's kind of like with the movie coming out with Amy Adams's red hair, everyone was kind of up in arms over that too. Or it was like Lois is supposed to have black hair, and And I was on that side at one point, but it's Amy Adams, so.
Interesting. Okay, we'll get to that. Interesting, because I'm still on the dye your hair side. And I was actually watching the trailer in front of Iron Man 3 with my dad, who's a big Superman fan. And at the end of the trailer, he goes, she should have dyed her hair. She looks just like Lana Lang. It's so distracting. And I just thought that was hilarious. That's what my dad took away from it. I was just like, he's a hardcore, old-fashioned Superman fan.
Oh, there we go.
So I just thought that was great. I was like, my dad's commenting on it. That's hilarious. And then the New 52.
Yeah.
And they dissolve the marriage, and Lois and Clark don't even really work together. I mean, I think he works for Daily Planet for a little bit. He's like a blogger. He's really a rogue character.
Yeah.
And as you said, she's dating someone else.
Yeah, John Carroll, I think is his name.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have Action Comics, which is 5 years before Superman.
Yeah, it's really confusing.
Yeah, the timeline, whatever. It's so hard to keep track.
I know.
And yeah, so they work together sort of, but then Clark becomes like this radical blogger or something.
Yeah.
I was kind of confused at one point because he's going on about journalistic integrity, and Lois is a media reporter, like she's a gossip columnist, basically.
Well, it's weird because she's not even really on camera. She's behind the scenes running it from the booth.
Yeah.
And that takes Lois out of the field, which is like, that's the whole point of Lois, And I know there's been a push to make her an on-camera reporter because, journalism is changing, from print to video.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think she works best as a journalist.
She does, and that's what was
a print
confusing me.
journalist.
But what would have made more sense is if Lois had done what Clark did, is become the radical blogger.
Oh, that's a great idea. That would have been interesting because she's such a radical character anyway.
Exactly. Like I think it was them trying to make Clark more relevant that they sidestepped the whole point of what Lois does. Mm-hmm. That she is the far more radical person in that relationship and that dynamic.
That would have been great to switch it. He's the classic reporter working for the big chain, and Lois is the radical blogger, and that would really go with her kind of like, persona of really being, very scraggly and, quirky and, getting those scoops. Oh, that's a great idea. I love that. Okay, so that clearly should be what they should have done.
She'd be the one on Twitter, like over in, the Middle East, or been like, oh my God, there's this thing happening and I'm reporting on it.
Did with Betty Brant over at the Daily Bugle, and it's interesting. I think Spider-Man and Superman have a lot of the same problems. They dissolved both their marriages. Yeah. They both worked for print, and they had to kind of address the dying print media problem. But the other problem is that when they dissolved both their marriages, they had Carly Cooper come in over in Spider-Man, but they've never really brought in any other love interests that are major for either of them. I mean, even the New 52, Superman's like, I've always had a crush on Lois Lane. He confessed this to Jimmy Olsen, his roommate. And I was like, already we're going here? I mean, what was the point of breaking them up?
Well, and then you also have the Wonder Woman relationship over in Justice League.
Don't get me started on the Wonder Woman relationship. How do you feel about the Wonder Woman relationship?
I think Wonder Woman as a partner is she highlights more of that alien quality in him, whereas again Lois kind of brings him back down. She's like, you are protecting Earth.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I mean, I think that's why some people some people are really in favor of their relationship of Wonder Woman and Superman. And maybe that's because they like that it highlights... I find such a division with Superman fans. Is he a human or is he his human side or his alien side? And so that's really interesting. And so that's what's going on. I think they haven't really actually changed that much with the New 52. I mean, except, Lois is still being treated like crap.
I liked Andy Diggle's first issue.
Thank you. I was just thinking that.
Yeah. Action Comics, 19? His first and only, true issue, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, when they were at the bar, right?
I was reading that. I was like, that's Lois Lane. That is exactly the Lois Lane I want, for all time.
It was Lois and Clark updated for modern times on assignment in the Middle East, and I just really thought that was good. So let's move over into media, because I think that, as I said, that's where I think that's why the mainstream is so familiar with Lois, and everyone, why she's such a popular character that people know about. Yeah. So she starts out on the television show with George Reeves, where they pull a Darren, Darren on Bewitched, and they have two different Loises.
Exactly.
So ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I used to watch it on Nick at Night reruns when I was a kid. Would watch The Adventures of Superman.
Was it any good? So I've never seen the show. How was Lois depicted on the show?
From what I remember, this is going back to when I was probably 9 or 10. I liked the show. I mean, because I remember it more for George Reeves just because he was such a presence. Lois, as I recall, it was much more of the Girl Friday kind of aspect where she's like, "Say, Clark, why aren't you around when Superman's around?" She was very much the, I'm at the Daily Planet. He goes off and does his adventure kind of thing, and then I wonder where he went. I don't remember a lot of Lois being kind of a really like instigator in any kind of stories.
Interesting.
From what I can recall.
And I think that's why she's not so well remembered from that series. It is all about George Reeves. But then you have the Richard Donner films.
Mm-hmm.
I think Margot Kidder, even though it's unfortunate what happened to her in real life, I think she was a great Lois.
I liked her. Yeah, I've only seen actually the first two. The last two, which I've heard, are probably worth skipping anyway. But I liked her, especially in the first one, because there was just that. She had that kind of like that spunky attitude that you really associate with Lois. I do like the idea that she can't spell. I think it's a cute little quirk to kind of give her, that people are always correcting her no matter what.
Yeah, you don't want to make Lois perfect or annoying. I mean, it's a very hard role because Lois can easily verge into annoying territory.
Yeah.
Like really into annoying, grating territory.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I liked that they cast someone who was, like, I think, likable to men and women.
Mm-hmm.
They could have very easily been like, let's go find the latest starlet and, stick a black wig on her, which I think is what they did with Superman Returns, why Kate Bosworth worked so poorly. Then you have my favorite Lois, Teri Hatcher, and Lois and Clark.
Hello, Lois and Clark.
It's so good. It's so good. I think Dean Cain was okay, but I think Teri Hatcher was the stronger character there.
Mm-hmm.
But Teri Hatcher, I think, she found the perfect balance of how to play Lois with her aggressiveness, but still being very feminine. And I just think that to me is still Lois to this day.
Yeah, she. I mean, if you go from Kidder to Teri Hatcher, I mean, it's sticking with that same vein of a career woman who meets this guy comes into her life, and suddenly it's like, oh, okay, here we go, and the competitive aspect. I love Teri Hatcher so much.
She was just fantastic. I mean, she really did a great job, and it was interesting because she also, for the first time, I think Lois was also a sex symbol.
Yeah.
There's that famous shot of Teri Hatcher with the cape, and she got, instantly was picked as a Bond girl off of that series.
Oh, really? I didn't know that one.
Yeah, the Pierce Brosnan film, because she was such a big deal. That was one of the things that influenced me, but then there was also Superman Adventures with Dana Delany. That's where she came in. Batman the Animated Series was so successful, they're like, let's do a Superman one. And that Lois, I guess because it was a cartoon, but there wasn't a lot of romance in that relationship.
She doesn't even find out he's Superman until the last episode of the series.
Which makes sense, because they didn't spend a lot of time together.
Exactly.
It's like Lois and Clark. I mean, I don't think there were hardly any Lois and Clark scenes on that show, I felt. And even when there were, she was like not looking at him. She was just like, go away, Clark.
Yeah, she's always like, hey, that thing's happening. Maybe Superman should show. What?
She actually had more of a romance with Bruce Wayne when they did the crossover, right? I was like, what's happening? That's
in the world's
couple.
finest crossover.
I thought we were a horrible couple. I was like, no way would Bruce Wayne. I mean, he would flirt with her, but they are not a good couple.
Well, and I think it was also she finds out that he's Batman, and then she's I can't deal with this, and then it's just, well, that means her and Superman, I guess.
Just cut to Clark, Superman being all awkward, being like, I'm glad I found this out now.
He's like, wah, wah.
Yeah, I liked the crossover, the world's finest movie they did, but I did, the 3-episode arc, but I didn't like that aspect of it.
I think Dana Delany, it's kind of like with Batman the Animated Series, how, Kevin Conroy defines the voice of Batman in the television, the cartoons. Dana Delany defines the voice of Lois Lane.
And she had the right balance. I feel a lot of the actresses they're casting as Lois now are too soft, their voice quality is too soft, or they're too hard. You have someone who comes off as a jerk. That Lois balance is so crucial.
I think the closest, was Polly Perrette in, what was it, Superman versus the Elite.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think she was the one for me that was the closest, and I haven't seen Superman Unbound yet. Yeah. So I don't know how Stana Katic has done at this point.
I saw a clip from it, and I don't know, the clip was like Lois basically takes down like a Brainiac robot with a desk chair.
Oh, I didn't know it was that easy.
I know. Superman's like, I've been wasting so much energy, and she calls him she calls him some lame curse word because it's for kids, and you're just like, what am I watching? So I don't know. So then they have Smallville,
Mm-hmm.
I never watched Smallville. I get asked about it all the time. I was like, Superman on television, I resent it, and so I didn't watch it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like, as I've said many, many times, I don't like everyone knowing each other as children. So I'm like, Lex Luthor's in Smallville or visiting regularly, I'm not interested. But what did you think of Erica Durance as Lois? Because she doesn't look like Lois to me at all.
Yeah, I watched Smallville for the first couple of seasons when it first started, and then fell out of love with it, or it just wasn't on when I was watching television. And I came back to it, and I saw Erica Durance in a few episodes. She's fine. They definitely played up the undercover reporter aspect as she got further along in the series, where they were putting her in every skimpy outfit they could possibly find. So there was that, because there's a famous still, not famous, but there's a still of her in the Wonder Woman outfit.
Yeah, I mean,
or I think like a costume party.
I mean, maybe they had to change it because Christian Crook as Lana had dark hair. So they
Maybe.
were like, they can't both have dark hair. But I mean, I'm like, I don't see why not. Because it's just, it's Erica Durance. I didn't see her performance, but she just doesn't have the look down. And again, it's a softer Lois,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just not a fan of that.
Personality-wise, I think she was okay. I think she captured some of the edgier qualities at times. It depends. Smallville, kind of like Arrow is now, depending on who the writer is,
Oh,
works
interesting.
versus doesn't.
And also, it's worth noting that they had Teri Hatcher come on that show as I think
Yeah.
Lois's mom, right?
Yeah, she played her mom.
Yeah,
so.
who was dead, but made like a video and was like, "Oh, hello, guest star, I miss you."
Yeah.
Margot Kidder was on there too, right? And they got everybody on there. They had some stuff.
With Lois, it was kind of, we brought her in because she's Chloe's cousin, and she wasn't even really a journalist until way later. It kind of got pushed upon her or something like that.
Really? That makes sense. That's what it looks like. It's like
Yeah.
cheerleader Lois, and I'm like, not into that. So, but then they have Kate Bosworth come in and play this for Superman Returns. I mean, basically what happened, I believe, from what I could glean, was that Kevin Spacey had directed the Bobby Darin movie, and Kate Bosworth had co-starred with him. So when Bryan Singer was making Superman Returns, Kevin Spacey was like, "I'm telling you, Kate Bosworth is a great actress. You have to hire her." I don't know why he took her word for it. I mean, his word for it. I'd be like, thanks, Kevin. But he cast her.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, and it was real. And considering he was trying so hard to be like the Donner movies, that's such an odd choice. Especially because I've heard some people say that Parker Posey, who plays Lex Luthor's girlfriend, would have been a great Lois Lane.
Yeah, because I watched Superman Returns way after it had come out, and because it's such a love letter to the Donner movies in the worst ways possible.
Yeah, it's like the Donner stalker.
Yes.
You're like, you've twisted it. It has one great scene, the plane rescue.
Yeah.
That was well done. And Lois being on the plane, of course.
Oh, yeah.
But, she was pure damsel in distress there.
Well, and it was the whole, and she was really mopey Lois, too. It was,
oh, yeah.
Superman left me, so I wrote an article that said, "We don't need Superman."
It's so unprofessional. Come on, Lois. Yeah.
She got a Pulitzer out of it, I bet, so
well, not
win-win.
only that, but, they saddled her with a kid and this crazy romance to James Marsden's character. And, and it put such a wedge in her relationship with Superman. It was just, when a Superman's kid, of course, obviously.
Yeah.
And, it was like Lois and Clark as divorcees, really.
It just felt like emo Superman and emo Lois Lane versus that really, highly energetic relationship that they should have, that Lois should at least be bringing into the dynamic.
But then now we have very interesting casting for Amy Adams for Man of Steel.
Yeah.
So you and I are torn on this. I do think Amy Adams has the spunk.
Yes.
Perfectly.
In most of her other movies, even Night at the Museum 2, when she's playing Amelia Earhart.
Oh, she was great in that. Yeah.
I actually really like those movies. I know a lot of people don't, but they're fun for me.
They're fun. Yeah, they're fun. Also, she's a more mature Lois. She's a full adult Lois, which I also appreciate. They didn't go I like Gwyneth Paltrow very much. In the Iron Man movies for that reason. It's nice to have the male characters are going to be full adults. I think the female characters should too.
Yeah, exactly. And I like Amy Adams. Yeah, I know there's the whole idea of should her hair be black,
as we were discussing. Yeah.
Keeping her hair her natural red color, which you think she should
I'm
she should
against
dye it?
it. Yeah, I'm like, get the dye out, dye the eyebrows. You gotta do it.
I was on the fence about it because when I first saw the stills of her and she still had the red hair, I was like, well, she's going to dye it eventually, right? That's just like pre-production.
That's hilarious. They're like, special effects team,
Yeah,
go to work.
exactly. Miss Adams' hair done by Industrial Light and
That poor special effects guy. He's like an intern just promoted. They're like, get every hair black, and he's like, oh God.
Yeah.
My problem is that with the red hair, as my dad said, she's Lana Lang.
Mm-hmm.
And she also, even though she has the spunk, she very much has the Clark Kent, farm girl turned big city person vibe to me. Amy Adams does not look like she grew up on an army base to me, or in the city.
I think it's also that we don't get enough of Lois in the trailer either. I mean, it's really all we get is kind of her little narration in the full trailer. About how she's been searching for this guy.
What do you think of that? What do you think of that kind of angle? That's how Lois knows about Superman. Like, she doesn't discuss. He doesn't just like. And every other version, he makes his big entrance, and Lois is like, "I'm here to cover it," and he's like, "You're cute. I'll give you the scoop."
I would love it if someone actually wrote that into a comic.
Right? He's like, "Who should I give my big scoop to?" And then Lois is like, "Hello."
You there?
She's like, "This isn't professional either, but I'll take it."
Yeah. I know that you've been on the fence about the trailer with how Man of Steel is being portrayed so far. I kind of got on board with that trailer.
A lot of people have, yeah. I think that the idea of her looking into this guardian angel, that makes sense. That it's a developing story. But some people have said, well, why is she interrogating him in the military, briefing room in the trailer?
Yeah.
And I was at this event, and someone in the audience was like, well, clearly because she's been investigating him for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But part of me is like, do you really think that Lois Lane has noticed a pattern of events that the military didn't in today's, terrorism, post-terrorism world? I don't know. The FBI sometimes misses a lot.
It's possible. I mean, like you said, I like the aspect that, especially since this movie seems to be, it's going to be about Clark's journey to become that symbol as Superman at the end. Because I don't know if we're going to get the Clark Kent Lois Lane dynamic until maybe the end of the movie, which would lead into a sequel.
Right. Yeah, I think you're totally right on that.
So it would make sense that in his journey of discovery, he's out there helping people, and there could be reports of these things happening. Like we see him on an oil rig, basically, holding up the rig as it's coming down.
On fire.
Yeah. So there could be reports from people coming in being like, oh my God, this guy did this thing, and that intrigues her.
Well, you're giving me an interesting idea. Maybe they'll have Lois Lane come up with the Daily Planet angle. She's like, maybe you can come work with me, and she'll cover from him from the beginning.
That could happen too.
I could see that happening. And as I see, they have some TV spots that came out. Clearly, Lois will be in danger because she's standing right there. I don't see a General Lane listed in the credits.
Yeah, I haven't seen that too, because you would think that if her father is a military general,
that's how she gets in, right?
That would be the in. It's like, oh well, my daughter's been investigating this thing. There's a dude in a suit.
And also, that's how she can investigate it and gets the heads up about it in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. So I hope maybe that's just like a secret and they're holding it back and there will be a General Lane, because I do like that part of Lois, and that would make sense, as you're saying, why she's on that army base. Because otherwise, what's a civilian doing there?
Exactly.
Clark wouldn't meet a reporter, he would meet a military liaison. And that's who he would maybe have a relationship with, if you're going to change the character.
And I do like that little scene that we do get of them too. Like there's just the way Amy Adams is sitting, like her presence in that scene, very much speaks to me as Lois.
In the interrogation room, right?
Yeah, in the interrogation.
Yeah, when she says, well, here it's an S. I do like that. I don't like when they're holding hands. In the other one, if I was like a soldier, I'd be rolling my eyes. I'd be like, what is going on here? Why are we standing here watching them flirt?
Why are we having an emotional reaction to this? Shouldn't we be shooting it with guns?
Yeah, exactly. I'd be like, come on. But I think Lois looks to me like maybe the most on point. Also, let me ask you this before we go. There's a rumor that Jimmy Olsen's now a girl.
Yeah, Jenny Olsen.
Yes. I don't like it because I think it makes the Daily Planet too female-centric.
I haven't given much thought to it. I think it makes sense from what I read. The point of view is that Jenny Olsen looks up to Lois, like she's a role model for her, which I mean, you can work with that. That's fine.
Superman doesn't need a pal. It's Lois
No.
Lane's pal.
Lois needs a pal. Yeah.
That's fine. I guess that's her friend. She has a friend now.
And so it especially with a lot of Nolan's films. I mean, because it is Zack Snyder directing, but Nolan and David S. Goyer have constructed the script. So they're always kind of about changing certain aspects of the canon. And I think that it's okay to change Jimmy around.
I'm glad you brought up Nolan and Snyder because I feel that they have really neither one has a good track record with female characters. I mean, I kind of liked Catwoman, but I think that they don't do a good job. And also in Watchmen, I was so annoyed because a lot of the Silk Spectre's lines were taken and given to male characters in the exact same scene where she was still on the scene.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, why would you do that?
Definitely the director's cut of Watchmen is better for Laurie because she gets a little bit more to do.
Exactly. I know. They're like, everyone gets a backstory but Laurie. Maybe they'll redeem themselves because Lois is just such a strong character.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's with a lot of the Superman stuff, especially with Scott Snyder and Jim Lee's book coming out.
Oh, yes.
A lot of people have been like, well, what about Lois? What about Lois? And it's almost like you have to put out the fires beforehand because Lois is so a part of Superman's world that if she doesn't get her dues, there's a real reaction from people. It's just like, she's just as important.
Glad you brought it up, though, because I think Scott Snyder, if you read his American Vampire, he writes very good female characters.
Yeah, he knows how to write women.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that Lois will be treated well, too.
I hope so.